At perhaps the most disturbing intersection of mythology and history lies the practice of human sacrifice. How can an act considered the ultimate sacrilege in the modern world be so prevalent in the ancient?
Human sacrifice is committed by Agamemnon. Achilles, we are told, slaughters 12 Trojan youths to appease the spirit of his friend Patroclus. And at the end of the war, Polyxena is sacrificed at the grave of Achilles.
Although these incidents of human sacrifice exist in the mythological realm, there's also a wealth of historical evidence. From Egypt to Babylon, slave and prisoner sacrifice was widespread during the Bronze Age, often used as a public display of the king's power. But could the Greeks, founders of Western civilization, also have practiced human sacrifice?
There seems to be some archaeological record of human sacrifice. I'm just going to mention certain chamber tombs here in the area of Mycenae, where we have found bodies of slaves, one on top of the other. They were probably slaughtered when their master died, or prisoners of war, and so on and so forth. To them, it was not probably human sacrifice. What we consider human sacrifice is not the same thing with what they consider human sacrifice. A slave or a prisoner of war is an object, is not a human being.
Although human sacrifice is prevalent in the mythology of Greece and the Trojan War, Homer never mentioned it in the Iliad. It was a few hundred years after Homer that some of the greatest Greek playwrights mentioned human sacrifice in their stories of the Trojan War. One reason may have been as a storytelling device to entertain their audiences.
It's often true that forms of religious behavior that were once sacrosanct and received great veneration later on become the subject for horror and a way of getting a chill, really, out of the audience.
In the story of the Trojan War, Agamemnon succeeded in assembling a coalition of Mycenaean warriors. But as they prepared to set sail for Troy, the winds blew against them. The oracle told Agamemnon that for favorable winds, he would have to sacrifice his daughter, Iphigenia.
He did so by summoning her to Aulis on the pretext that she was going to be married to Achilles. Instead, he butchered her, and in so doing, set in train a terrible set of events that would end in his own death.
To the Greeks, this was a powerful message, whether real or mythological. In war, a king asks his subjects to sacrifice the lives of their sons. Now the king, by offering his daughter, was making a similar sacrifice. The Greeks may see it as democratic and egalitarian. If not us, why not the king? And if not our sons, why not his daughter?
To us, the idea of sacrificing Iphigenia seems horrific. But given the religion and mores of the time, the sacrifice of Iphigenia was a supreme expression of commitment on the part of Agamemnon. He was so committed to the success of this enterprise that he was willing to sacrifice his own daughter. That must have had an effect upon the psyche of his soldiers, because they recognized how dedicated he was and how much he expected of them.
And so the first blood spilled in the Trojan War was that of a child. Ultimately, Agamemnon would pay for his daughter's death with his own life. But for now, a forceful wind blew the Greek war fleet east. to Troy. What the Greeks didn't know was the resistance they were about to meet at the hands of Hector and his army of Trojans. To forge a coalition of Mycenaean warriors and satisfy the gods, Agamemnon made the ultimate sacrifice, the ritual murder of his own daughter. In 1,000 ships, the Greeks sailed east to Troy with dreams of wealth and honor. But their overwhelming force was negated by the fierce Trojans and their powerful allies. They fought to a standstill for 10 long years. Powerful egos and dissension in the Greek ranks threatened to destroy the coalition from within. It was a defining moment in prehistory to which, once again, Homer may be our best witness.
In the 16,000 lines or so of Homer's Iliad, he explores all the major questions which we still grapple with as we make war today and consider the questions around warfare. The justification for a major military exercise, the accountability, the quality of military leadership, the nature of courage and cowardice on the battlefield, and indeed what happens to victors and defeated alike in the face of day-to-day brutality.
And yet, in his Iliad, Homer didn't chronicle the entire 10 years of battle, but focused on just 4 days of the war's 10th and final year.
He brings us, I think, to the very heart of what human conflict is all about. Some of his most memorable descriptions are of men dying. The 240 deaths that occur in the Iliad, all are different. Homer must have seen action at first hand. He must surely have gone over the battlefield at Troy and tried in his own imagination to recreate how this battle took place. We see warfare from so many different angles, and we see it up close and personal from Homer.
Warriors clash on the battlefield, calling out names and insults. Soldiers thrust spears through enemy eyes, swinging swords hacking off limbs. Homer says black blood stained the battlefield. His name defines this brutal age of warfare, known as the heroic or Homeric era.
This was very much an individual contest for personal glory. And there was believed to be a glory in the nature of your opponents and in the extent of your success over them. It's a bit more tribal. The nature of your military reputation depends upon who you individually fight and how well you do against them.
Homer described many duels, but he portrayed one as the ultimate duel, the one to end 10 years of war. Menelaus, the offended husband of Helen, was challenged by Paris, Helen's Trojan lover. If Paris killed Menelaus, Helen would stay in Troy and the Greeks would withdraw defeated. But if Menelaus killed Paris, he would reclaim Helen, take a king's ransom of gold from Troy, and Greek honor would be restored.
The two armies sit down and the duel takes place. This is sanity, Homer is saying. This is how it should be. But it's not how it goes.
Menelaus and Paris crossed swords, risking life and honor to end a decade of conflict. Menelaus overpowered Paris and prepared to strike a death blow. But then Homer rescued Paris with a stroke of divine intervention. The goddess of love, Aphrodite, whisked Paris off the battlefield and into the arms of Helen. The duel ended unfulfilled, and the truce erupted in war.